Hello and welcome to this week's Hippie Hyena. Now, this week we're going to take a look at the subreddit known as No New Normal, which is kind of a place for, how do I put this? COVID deniers, vaccine deniers, or anti-vaxxers to sort of congregate and spread their stupidity. Reddit probably should have banned this quite some time ago because it is a hotbed of misinformation, as we'll see. Anyway, let's not waste any time and jump in to what is bound to be some quite piquant stupidity.
If the unvaccinated are dying because of the unvaccinated, why are the unvaccinated not dying?
Well, here we have our first nuggets of delicious misinformation, because the unvaccinated are dying in droves. They're dying so much. In fact, 99% of deaths due to COVID were amongst the unvaccinated. But you can see in this little bubble, they have some very unusual ideas that are quite distinctly separate from reality, let's put it that way. And there's this particular tone to this meme that I'm sure you can recognise, which is like, oh, if you think this, then what about all of this information that contradicts it? But that kind of smugness is somewhat undercut by the information. I'm generously calling it information. It really should be called disinformation. Is just wildly inaccurate. It's sort of the equivalent of saying, oh, if the Earth is round, then why, when it's filmed from space, does it look flat? Well, it doesn't. Just like, this is just total nonsense. But, you know, where the Earth being flat or round really doesn't have many consequences, if people want to believe that it's flat, as long as you're not sort of designing spaceships or flying planes or something, or navigating anywhere, or doing anything where that really matters, or building buildings, bridges, and anything that relies on the Earth being round. As long as you're not doing that, and let's face it, if you think the Earth is flat, you probably aren't, then it doesn't really have many consequences for the rest of the people on the planet. But misinformation like this, that the unvaccinated aren't dying when they're dying a lot, is extremely damaging in a large number of ways, and this sort of attitude will go on to result in the deaths of thousands, maybe even millions, who knows.
A man walking alone drinking coffee is a threat to the public, but these gatherings were absolutely not super-spreader events.
Now, this sort of post here gives a kind of idea of the sort of person who is interested in this kind of misinformation and mad conspiracy theory nonsense that is going to get a lot of people killed. In that they have directed it at specifically Black Lives Matter protests. Now, the thing about Black Lives Matter protests is that all of these people were in a well-ventilated area outdoors with wearing masks, and they found that it didn't significantly increase the spread of COVID. But you know what did significantly increase the spread of COVID? It was all of these idiotic anti-masker events and the Trump rallies and stuff where people wouldn't wear masks. So why not pick on them? Well, the reason they're not picking on them and not using them for this meme is because they are ideologically aligned to those people who are flouting the COVID rules. They're not ideologically aligned with this group of people, because this group of people were trying to stop black people from getting killed. And the person who made this meme and is sharing it, and the people who upvoted it, and the people who are allowing it to continue on their site and on their sub and not criticizing it, they don't care about black people being killed in great numbers by police. They don't care. What they care a lot more about is whether or not they have to wear a bit of cloth on their face because they're babies. But it also gives you a kind of idea as to the political interests of these sorts of anti-vaxxer groups and these sort of COVID denialist groups, and really the groups of people who are making the pandemic go on longer and worse for all of us, who are pretty much directly responsible for all of the inconvenience that we've had after at least the first year. It's the right wing. It's the right... Surprise, surprise! It's the right wing again, ruining everything for everyone, including themselves, because it's not like they're enjoying this quarantine either, but they're making it last longer because they're whiny little babies. And they just cannot help themselves in being wrong. I think that is really, in a weird way, the main interest they have in denying that there's a pandemic or being anti-vaxxers. It's because that's the wrong perspective. It doesn't really help them politically. It doesn't help them, their bottom line. It's just that they're just so in love with being wrong that they're willing to kill a lot of people to continue being as wrong as they can.
The left in 2011 don't trust big banks. The left in 2013 don't trust big AGG. The left 2021 trust the science, trust big pharma, get vaccinated.
And you know, here you can see a really good example of that just sheer wanton desire to be as wrong as possible. Because you could easily take this meme and just flip it on its head. Because in 2011, the left was saying, don't trust big banks. But the right was saying, effectively, do trust the big banks. And it's a very bad idea to do that. In 2013, the right was saying, do trust Monsanto. Do trust the big corporations. And then the one time where it would make sense to be a bit more consistent in that kind of trusting of authority position, where like everyone is dying and we need vaccines to help ourselves, that's the one time that the right have a problem with authority, when they're actually trying to help people, when they're actually trying to make things better. That's what the right have an objection to. And you can really see this all over. It's like recently Trump came out in opposition to a bill to build infrastructure, to like build patch roads and stuff, and just sort of like make sure everything didn't fall apart. But he came out in opposition to that, as well as his acolytes did. Why? Like, who could possibly have a problem with fixing roads? Well, the right-wing project is against any intervention that helps people. They don't mind things that like really fuck people over, like the behaviour of banks and these horrible multinational drug companies like Monsanto, and well, they usually do a food, but the drug companies, the food companies and so on, because quite often they're paid by them to say what they say, so they're fine with those guys. But the moment anyone in authority tries to help anyone, that's what they have a problem with. It's just like I said, just sort of completely psychologically addicted to being wrong on every single subject. If something's good, they think it's bad, and if it's bad, they think it's good.
Treating people who are not sick as if they are sick by forcing them to act sick, social distancing, wear masks, quarantine, isolation, is a mental illness called Munchausen syndrome.
Or, alternatively, in the real world, it's called responsible behaviour during a goddamn pandemic. It's just baffling to me how these people just don't seem to be able to get their heads around it. It's almost as if it's sort of like too big for them to understand. Like, they can understand these sort of like petty concerns that sort of operate within a very small purview of experience, but anything outside of that, it might as well be some sort of like eldritch horror from outside of space and time. It's a virus, okay? It spreads around, okay? We're trying to stop it from spreading around, so we're trying to do things that will stop it from spreading around, because if we don't, people will die. It's very, very simple. It just beggars belief that these people are so thick-skulled, so smooth-brained, that this really, really simple concept cannot penetrate. I read somewhere there was this study that people who have a propensity towards conservative opinions find it incredibly difficult to grasp concepts of threats that are not intentioned. So if there is some sort of problem, they can only understand that problem insofar as it has malicious intent behind it, and a virus doesn't have malicious intent behind it. It's just a problem that needs to be dealt with. There's no sort of like scheming, evil, malicious person behind the virus. It's just a virus. And that seems to be perhaps one reason why they just literally can't understand it. And I think it's especially ironic that they're calling people who do understand it suffering from some kind of mental disease, when it seems clear to me that there is a mental disease involved here, but it ain't the people who believe in COVID who have it. It's a mental disorder, and its name is conservatism.
No mask, no entry to shops, no mask, no airline travel, no mask, no public transport. transport. No mask, no access to public buildings. No mask, no work. No mask, no school. Now replace mask with vaccine for what comes next.
Now, I found this tweet that was reshared, so I guess it's a meme now. Are screenshotted tweets memes? I don't know. So that's an ongoing debate that other people can have. I found it interesting because I think it perfectly explains why there is this high degree of overlap and tessellation between conservatism and vaccine and coronavirus denial. It's because what this is a complaint about having to face the consequences of antisocial actions. Now, conservatives love doing antisocial actions like doing a racism or a sexism or a sexual assault or a paedophilia. They're well into that stuff. But what they really hate, what they really, really, really hate is facing any degree of consequence or criticism for doing those actions. And they call any degree of consequence or criticism for those actions things like cancel culture. They say, oh, I'm being cancelled just because I did a racism. Well, no, you're facing the natural consequences of antisocial behaviour. You're being antisocial, and therefore society is removing you from that society. That is just the natural consequence of like doing bad behaviours which really annoy everyone. People won't want you around. As I've used the metaphor several times, if someone comes round to your house to a party, shits in their hand and starts smearing it on the walls, you're probably not going to invite them back. And conservatism is the ideological equivalent of smearing shit on your walls, on society's walls. And what you have here is a person saying, oh, I want to not wear a mask. I want to be able to go around coughing my infected lungs onto people, but I don't want to be excluded from society. Well, that's just how it is, man. If you're not willing to do basic precautions to not infect your fellow man, they're not going to want you around, and they're going to exercise their right to get rid of you.
I feel sad when I see people using the term Karen. It's just such an overused term. That's the thing about internet culture. You really have to get it and be there at the right time or it's over. Karen is done. It was done a while ago. When someone uses Karen, I think of the scene in American Pie where Jim walks over to a group and starts hysterically laughing, even though it's painfully obvious he doesn't know what the joke is. Now that the doomers have started overusing it, it's really lost all meaning.
Brilliant. You know who's sick of people using the word Karen? I'll tell you it's Karens. I still love the term Karen, like the word Karen. I think it's great. It perfectly describes a particular group of incredibly entitled, snotty people who think that they own the world and everything, and hopefully get their comeuppance, because that is quite fun. There's nothing more fun than watching a Karen being forcibly dragged out of a supermarket or somewhere for refusing to do the basic courtesy of wearing a mask during a pandemic. It's just glorious, and I'm not surprised that the people in the No New Normal subreddit feel sad. They feel sad when they hear someone using the word Karen, and they're gonna come up with a load of bunkers. Oh, it's over, it's not cool anymore. Oh, that's not the reason they're sad. We all know that's not the reason they're sad. The reason they're sad is because they keep getting called Karen. You know, it's sort of like, again, it tessellates with the whole conservative perspective of like being upset about being called racist all the time. Well, you know what? I don't get called racist at all. Why? Because I'm not racist. If you don't want to be called a Karen, stop doing it. Stop doing the thing. Stop being a Karen, and people will not call you a Karen. And also, to be perfectly honest, if you really want to get rid of the word Karen, and if you're going to behave like a Karen, you have to stop being triggered by the word Karen, because that makes people want to use it a lot more on you, Karen.
Will you date someone who took the shots? I won't. I've been pondering this for some time. I have a hard time seeing myself with someone who was fooled into taking the vaccines. I'm also worried how sex or intimacy could affect me through supposed shedding. I don't know anymore. I've been single for some time now, since 2019.
Yeah, sure. Since 2019, sure. Or maybe since sort of like 1980 might be a little bit more accurate. I assume you're rounding up to 2019. Yeah, but interesting as well. Interesting that you wanted to clarify that you'd been single for a while, but since 2019, just to make it clear how much of an alpha you usually are, an alpha Chad. That usually but it's just been since 2019 that you haven't. And you don't feel insecure about that at all.
And it would be weird asking someone if they are vaccinated or not before deciding to meet up. What do you think?
Well, I've got some advice for you here. I'll answer that question, even though it wasn't asked to me. I feel as though I could definitely give you some advice on this one. I feel, to be honest, it is a problem that's going to resolve itself. I don't think it's going to get to that. I imagine that you probably have been giving it a lot of thought or pondering it a lot, as you say you are, but I feel it's likely that this hurdle will be something that will remain in the realm of thought and generally not be a problem. Because if there's one thing that women find deeply attractive, it's people who are scared of getting injections in order to help other people. Yeah, that definitely gives off a kind of alpha male energy, doesn't it? Poor sod. And it's also preventable too. Just get your head out of your ass and get off this bloody subreddit and start, imbibing some actual information instead of disinformation, and stop being such a little dweeb, and maybe you could hook up in the future. Who knows? I mean, anything's possible.
Refusing this vaccine is not selfish. How exactly is refusing this vaccine selfish? I've seen people ranting about this elsewhere, including here on Reddit, such as on the Rant sub, which I was recently banned from.
These people, I don't know what it is, but they keep getting banned from everywhere for obvious reasons, for spreading disinformation, dangerous disinformation that could lead to the deaths of thousands, possibly millions of innocent people. And yet somehow they don't take this constant social ostracization, this constant kicking out of every polite and sensible group that they ever try to infiltrate. They don't take this as some kind of sign that maybe they should curtail their behaviour. Maybe they should be a bit ashamed of themselves. But instead, they just power on through and just assign anyone who doesn't like them as sort of part of the conspiracy. I kind of feel like maybe that could possibly be part of the psychological purpose of these kind of conspiratorial ideas, that you can sort of go, well, maybe it's not me that's really annoying and everyone hates. Maybe there's a conspiracy to discriminate against me. But no, it's the first one. It's because you're an idiot and you're dangerous and you're ruining everyone else's lives and they don't want you around. That's why they're banning you from everywhere. You're so toxic that people have given up on trying to educate you out of your toxicity and just want you to not be around.
So let's assume that the vaccine actually does work in preventing severe illness. After all, most people already do, even though it's evident that it's clearly not the case, nor is there any actual proof that it does.
That's false on all counts. Of course there is evidence that it does. As they've tested it, maybe not originally quite as thoroughly as they tested vaccines in the past, and that's because they needed to expedite it, obviously, to prevent more people dying. But how many people have had the vaccine now? Like, a lot of people worldwide have had the vaccine for quite some time now. Some people, especially over a certain age, have had the vaccine, of different types of vaccines, for quite some time, and it is working. That is like a real world test. It's a real world test going on right now. We're seeing the results of the test, and it is preventing the virus. It is working as intended, with basically minimal side effects.
Let's also assume that this is the only way of preventing severe COVID cases. We all know things like ivermectin exists.
So, for those of you who don't know, ivermectin is the new hydrochloroquine, which is the new sort of junk medicine. For some weird reason, hydrochloroquine was like a worm medicine for fish, and ivermectin is like a worm medicine for some other animal. They've got this weird bee in their bonnet about worm medicines, I don't know. But for some reason, they've picked out ivermectin as this new alternate cure that Big Pharma is trying to cover up. It's just a load of old bunk. And probably some people are going to try and take some of it and maybe die. The sort of IDW has been promoting this, and it does have a whole lot of horrible side effects if taken in large enough doses, especially when unsupervised by medical advice. And Big Pharma didn't ignore it. I mean, they tested it and did a bunch of studies and discovered it didn't alleviate the symptoms of COVID or help prevent it. So, yeah, this is more just a generalised slew of misinformation that these people are sort of stewing in. And at the end of the day, it's just bizarre because on one level they say that COVID isn't a threat and maybe doesn't even exist. And on the other hand, they're promoting potentially hazardous hoax cures for it. Like, how can you do both? It doesn't make any sense. And they're talking about, the vaccine is untested. Well, ivermectin is untested as a COVID treatment. I mean, it very much is. As I said, I think it's usually used as a worm medicine for animals. Humans probably shouldn't be taking this stuff. And yet a vaccine, which has been tested on thousands and thousands of people worldwide, that's what they think is dangerous.
So in that case, if you take it, you're safe from COVID. You might get a little sick since it doesn't prevent infection, but you won't have to worry about being hospitalized or dying. So why do people care if people don't take it? Anyone who really needs it, old or unhealthy people, will most likely take it so they would be safe from COVID. And while there's immunocompromised people that can't get the vaccine, they make up such a tiny portion of the population. We're talking like maybe 0.001%, that it shouldn't even matter. And this is ignoring the fact that if you had the vaccine, you can still transmit it. So even if vaccinated people could get severely sick from non-vaccinated people, it wouldn't even matter since the vaccine doesn't prevent transmission anyway. So what's the point? The vaccine would only affect the user.
Now, this has got to be one of the most stultifyingly stupid things I've ever read in my life. For God's sake, how do you not understand this? Person who's taken the vaccine is much less likely to contract it and much less likely to pass it on if they have contracted it. So, it is worthwhile people taking the vaccine. It doesn't mean if you've taken the vaccine that you're going to be immune from other people who haven't taken the vaccine, who are contracting it, are much more likely to contract it, could pass it on to you, and you could still die. Now, it's less likely because you took the vaccine, but less likely isn't 0% chance. And if it's not 0% chance, if we're talking about even like 5%, 2% of the population, that is still millions of people. Millions of people will die because you guys are too selfish to get a shot. Yes, it's selfish. It's the most selfish thing you can do. Now, even if it turns out that the vaccine has some somewhat unpleasant side effects, which doesn't seem likely at this stage, but let's say it did turn out to be the case, it would still be the right thing to do to take it. It would still be incredibly selfish not to. It'd be incredibly cowardly, which is what it is. These people are so cowardly. They would rather avoid a minor inconvenience for a short period of time than to save millions of lives. And that's why they're COVID denialists, and it's also the reason they're conservatives. That combination of idiocy and selfishness.
You know what's actually selfish? Expecting people to take a vaccine that there is no recourse on, that is not even proven safe, and has killed tens of thousands of people, along with millions of others experiencing severe reactions from it.
Absolutely false. Do you want to know the real number of how many people have died as a result of taking the vaccine? The answer is 0. It's a big fat 0. There have been no vaccine-related deaths from any of the COVID vaccines. It's total nonsense. Total misinformation.
All to save a few older, unhealthy people that were probably already close to death anyway.
And that's what it really comes down to. Just really not caring if a bunch of other people die. There is one sort of saving grace about these people not taking the vaccine, is that they are more likely to die than people that have. Their existence does mean that people who have taken the vaccine are also more likely to die than if those other people had taken the vaccine. But, silver linings, I guess. So what can we learn from this? Well, we can learn that no new normal is a festering cauldron of misinformation, stupidity, Karens, racism, and everything wrong with conservatism today, which is to say everything about conservatism. So I hope you didn't find this too depressing, as it should be pointed out that there isn't many of these people, and they're kind of dying out because COVID likes to eat people who don't have the vaccine, who refuse to wear masks and refuse to socially isolate. So there's always that. Anyway, look after yourselves and each other. Get the vaccine if you can. Goodbye.